Hey guys, welcome back to the Fantasy Roundtable, back for episode 2 where we're going to be talking about breakout wide receivers. And before you get on me about, oh my god, this guy already broke out, we're going to be talking about these 3 wide receivers entering their 3rd season and really who's going to take that next step and almost enter into that wide receiver 1 territory. So we've got a couple guys here. So we're talking about Kenny Golladay, talking about Chris Godwin, and talking about Mike Williams. And so I'm going to open up to Brian first to talk about the lone truther on Mike Williams in this panel. And, the first thing I'm going to bring up is the guy caught like 10 touchdowns on like 45 targets last year. That screams touchdown regression for me. So what do you say to that? Especially with guys like Hunter Henry coming back and...
Yeah, for sure. No, it does. It's nice to see, though, that a guy like Phillip Rivers leans on somebody like Mike Williams in the red zone as a touchdown machine. So I get it when people want to fade Mike Williams because of that regression, but you got to remember, Tyrell Williams is out of there. Mm-hmm. Melvin Gordon's situation is in flux. So there's really, outside of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who is there? We got Austin Eckler, who's played a nice complementary role. Travis Benjamin's a nice, gadget player. And you have Hunter Henry obviously coming off the injury again.
He's a pretty good tight end.
And he is a really good. He is a real good tight end. I will say that. But Mike Williams, I think the uptick in target share is going to really help balance that touchdown regression out. And you got to remember, this guy was a top 10 pick a few years back.
John Ross was too, right?
Yes, he was. But Mike Williams has actually shown something on the field, and he has shown to be something comparable to a DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe not Julio Jones because he's a freak, but he's shown the traits to be an alpha wide receiver 1. It's going to be tough because you have Keenan Allen in that offense still. Any kind of injury that pops up, Mike Williams' target share can for sure go over 20%, and he's got the talent to make something happen.
Yeah, I will say that Melvin Gordon not being there is definitely helpful for him. I will say that for sure. I think that helps all the receivers, and I think that people are like, oh, Austin Eckler, like Justin Jackson, like really upping those guys, but not really looking at the offense as a whole. It's like the best players are going to now get the ball more, which is like Keenan Allen's, the Mike Williams, like the Hunter Henry's, like those guys I think are going to see actually a pretty big boost if Melvin Gordon isn't there, because Melvin Gordon caught a lot of passes last year. He scored a lot of touchdowns. And Eckler and Justin Jackson, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily like elite talents, whereas like those 3 guys you could argue like could enter into that kind of elite status. And it's in a highly prolific offense. Like that's one of the things they're always looking for is like Rivers is probably good for 30 touchdowns at least.
To back up Brian for a second, because I'm big on Mike Williams this year. He's not my guy in this episode.
He could be your guy though.
He could. You could be, because you brought up all the points that I've been defending on Mike Williams, which his target share clearly going to go up. He's going to have at least 30 more receptions than he had last year because Tyrell Williams is gone. Now, last year it was which Williams do you like better? And earlier on, a lot of people were pumping Tyrell Williams. Well, the Chargers no, it's Mike, because Phillip Rivers leaned on him often as one of his favorite targets in that offense last year, and it paid off big. It was, like you said, 10 touchdowns. I know that can't happen every season, but with an increase of targets that I'm expecting to see for him, he could easily be double-digit touchdowns again. I don't see that being insane, even with Hunter Henry back, because defenses might want to gravitate toward Hunter Henry. That still leaves things open for Mike Williams. So I like Mike Williams this year.
So you both, and you two both specific. So you think that Mike Williams has more targets than Hunter Henry?
Yes. Absolutely, yes.
And I also think you gotta realize what happened last year to the Chargers. They were crazy efficient, like out of this world. They ran some of the fewest amount of plays and scored some of the most points in the league. So you got to expect that to come back to the mean. So if you're just going off target shares of projections from last season, don't do that, because he's going to fall into somewhere in the high 80s, whereas it's going to be closer to over 100. And he is a supreme talent. So is Hunter Henry too, though. It's tough because he's a guy who obviously didn't make it back from that injury last year, Hunter Henry. So I don't know how impactful he's going to be to start this season. But I think everything screams Mike Williams is going to break out this year.
There's one stat that, for the next episode, we're talking about breakout tight ends, but I uncovered on Phillip Rivers and how he targets tight ends in the red zone. So last year, what did they have? Like the corpse of Antonio Gates. They had nothing there. So it makes sense that he leaned on Mike Williams, the great catch radius, and there's no reason he won't do that again. But the 2 years prior, when he had Henry and he had, Gates was a little bit younger, I guess. But more so Henry, he targeted tight ends at, I believe it was like 26 and like 25% of the time, and it was the first and fifth highest in the league. I just remember that. In terms of Rivers, and you look at Gates' whole career, he's just always loved peppering a tight end when he has it. So I think even if the overall targets do increase, and I think they will, Tyrell leaving will definitely lead to that. I am nervous those red zone looks, those jump ball one-on-one looks, and he is really good at it. He's still going to get plenty of them. I still see that coming down a bit in the touchdowns going to 6 or so, which maybe offsets a little bit, but that kind of lowers his ceiling compared to some of the other guys we have on this list, in my opinion.
Ultimately, it seems like you can kind of be, and if someone has another comment, it's like you're either like high on Hunter Henry or you're like high on Mike Williams, and you're kind of picking. And for me, I can get an edge at receiver anywhere. I can't get an edge at tight end. It's harder to do that. So that's why I'm gonna buy into Hunter Henry being that touchdown guy, because really it honestly seems like a coin flip to me. Like it really could go either way, but I'd rather hope that it works out with Hunter Henry at the tight end position where it's crap everywhere else. Whereas wide receiver, okay, I'll skip over Mike Williams because then I can go grab my boy Chris Godwin, who's obviously going to break out this year. I mean, if you go on Twitter, it's like Chris Godwin breakout season, all over the place. Yeah. So, I mean, it's easy for me to say.
Breaking news. Wait a second. What?
Like, Chris Godwin. Mentioned, Chris Godwin? Chris Godwin is like a sleeper. Yeah. And it's like.
No more.
Like, no, like,
he's
come
not
on.
A sleeper,
So Nick, I know you're kind of on me with Chris Godwin. So, why do you have Chris Godwin, as your kind of guy?
59 receptions last year, 95 targets, 842 yards, 7 TDs. I just feel now with Deshaun Jackson out of town, there's going to be an increase in targets going his way. Those targets to Deshaun Jackson were targets to a wide receiver. So
Adam Humphries is out there too. So
I'm not.
That's the biggest one.
The slot.
The slot is the biggest removal.
Slot targets are more valuable than any on the outside targets. You just get more yards, you get more efficient.
If Chris Godwin did get Kenny Golloway's target share that he got last year, their numbers would be almost identical with Chris Godwin leading the way with touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So, I have Chris Godwin over the 4 wide receivers that we picked a debate out of.
Yeah, and again with Chris Godwin, I think that he's, as much as we don't want to put everything on coaches, coaching does matter. And being in a Bruce Arians offense with a guy that literally came out of retirement was like, oh my, I'm going to the Bucs, I want this to work. Because he didn't retire because he wasn't a bad coach. He retired because he was like, God, I'm killing myself on the sideline. I need to get healthy. He's healthy now, just like these NFL players, they're all healthy right now, so we're all optimistic.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers aren't going to be trying to establish the run.
Yeah,
Rojo and Peyton Barber. They're going to be, Bruce Arians, aggressive, high octane, pass heavy,
no risk it, no biscuit.
Yeah, no biscuit offense. And when you have a gunslinger, Jameis Winston on a prove it year deal, I don't see Chris Godwin lacking those red zone targets at all. Jameis Winston's going to be putting up some balls for them.
And Dirk Cutter literally, with their hard knocks, when it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Dirk Cutter literally told Jameis Winston, hey, we have a good defense now, we have a good defense now, and you need to take care of the ball. Their defense ranked last year in literally everything. Everyone knew how terrible that defense was, and he kind of was trying to hold back Jameis Winston from just hey, just dude, go out and sling it. That's what you're good at. You're going to turn the ball over. Yeah, it's going to happen. But, that's why you want pieces of this offense. And again, mentioned with Watson in the last episode, shootouts, NFC South, it's going to be the Falcons and Panthers and Saints. And, all these games are just going to be, 40 points a game, in the Superdome. All these dome games with Jameis Winston. I don't see how that team isn't, at the top 5 in pass attempts and top 5 in passing yards. So all that stuff is there, and you can make, Mike Evans is there. But again, I saw an interview with Mike Evans. Mike Evans literally said, he and Chris Godwin are, competing for the number 1 wide receiver spot. He doesn't view Godwin as, he's the 2. He's no, me and Chris, we both view ourselves as,
But let's talk about that for a second. Who is the wide receiver 2 on that offense?
Chris Godwin.
Okay, Chris Godwin. Who's the wide receiver 2 in the Los Angeles Chargers offense?
I believe it's Mike Williams.
Mike Williams. Okay, so the fact that Kenny Golladay was even part of this conversation is amazing to me because he's the wide receiver 1 in his offense. Because, he has Golden Tate. Oh, wait a second. No, he doesn't have Golden Tate there anymore. Target monster's gone in that offense. And Kenny Golladay is a freak athlete in this offense. And Matthew Stafford throws the ball a ton. He had, an off season last year with his volume. But I see him returning to that now that they have a more balanced offense. Kerryon Johnson's going to be amazing this year. And I know they're saying they want to be more of a run, we're going to run the ball a ton, Offenses, teams can say that all they want. You're going to have to throw the ball if you're the Lions. Let's face it, because all around they're not like this. We're not thinking they're going to be Super Bowl champions this year. So I see them being behind in a lot of games, which is going to result in a lot of passes. Those passes are going to Kenny Golladay because he is clearly the best option on that team. So he should easily finish above any guys we're discussing right now, just because we're talking wide receiver 2s versus wide receiver 1
I disagree.
in their offense.
I disagree totally because Chris Godwin has Mike Williams on the opposite side of him. Mike Williams is drawing the number one cornerback every single game.
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans is has the number one cornerback against him every single week. Chris Godwin's going against your second best corner. So give me the wide receiver who's going against the second best corner on a team that doesn't have, Kerryon Johnson, who they aren't trying to establish the run. I feel that Chris Godwin, gets to beat up on that second, best wide.
So here's what I say. Here's my rebuttal to that, because it sounds like a fair argument, but Mike Evans versus Chris Godwin. Mike Evans gonna draw all the attention, right?
Yeah.
Who's gonna finish ahead in that offense? Mike Evans or Chris Godwin? Probably Mike Evans, right? Okay, so the number one receiver is always going to get the attention, regardless. So that helps the numbers of the wide receiver 2 on the team. But there's a reason they're the wide receiver 2. They're not going to finish ahead of that wide receiver 1. And so, Kenny Golladay is going to have that same coverage that Mike Evans is going to have, that Keenan Allen's going to have. But they're still their number one wide receiver in their team for a reason, because they are the most talented wide receiver in that offense.
Yeah.
I'll throw out a couple stats to help both cases. That I'm still on the fence with both of them. Is one, you mentioned when Golden Tate's gone, Galladay's stats went from right around 6.2 targets to over 9 targets a game. He had a multiple 14, 15 target games. He was a hog, and he had a bunch of 25, blow up games. My worry, though, is that was a different offense. They bring in Darrell Bevel, very run-heavy guy. I know the Lions kind of suck, and they're going to have to play a lot of catch-up, but he's only had 3 1,000-yard receivers in 12 years of calling offenses. So that's, even if he's the true number 1, is that kind of, I like to call it an aerial pie, right? That aerial pie is going to be a lot smaller, is a slice of a much larger aerial pie with the Bucs. We know they're going to be chucking the rock. They have literally no one else to go to. Is that bigger aerial pie, even if it's the second slice, better, especially when you mentioned Humphreys leaves. If he takes that slot role, which everyone's saying they're pegging him for, he's already said, Bruce Arians, he's going to catch 100 balls in that. He's a full-time player. He's going to be our 2 wide receiver guy. He's going to move inside. So pretty much every single down, even if that's number 2, he might still out-target Mike Evans. And he's just such a big body. He's got, I think there's stats about how he had 11 red zone targets, one of only 5 or 10 receivers to have double-digit red zone looks. So that's kind of the debate, right? Is it better to have the number 1 in a smaller passing game, or is it better to have that number 2 in a high-volume slot-style role? And I'm on the fence about both.
Historically, Matthew Stafford doesn't have a smaller passing game. He's unbelievable. His attempts every season prior to last year was 600 attempts, easy.
Of course, but different
it's not a small pie we're talking.
It hasn't been historically. We're looking at this year.
He does have a different offensive coordinator now. That is not known for high passing volume. That's a fact.
And the one thing I want to bring up is just that's where I stand. I know he's the number 1, even though it's a slight edge over Marvin Jones or whatever it is, and Godwin's going to be the number 2. But I just feel like when Patricia went there was definitely a shift in philosophy. And their philosophy, I mean, you saw last year, they weren't a good team, and they still didn't pass a ton. Now, they have probably a better defense heading into this year, and I just can't see them switching over to, we're going to get back to throwing the ball a ton, which brings up your point, the aerial pie, which I just don't think is going to be enormous, even though Galladay's probably going to get the biggest chunk of that. And then Marvin Jones, his presence when he's on the field in the red zone for Matt Stafford, it's huge. It's huge. Yeah. So that's where I put him slightly behind those guys, even though I mean he was my bang the table guy last year, Golladay. I love him. I just think.
Well, this is his season.
Guys. Yeah, it
Damn
could be.
It's gonna happen. Let me bang the table.
It could be.
I mean, speaking, fantasy wise too, Tampa, they play in the South. They play in good weather. They play indoors at the Saints Dome and the Falcons Dome. You got Kenny Golladay playing in the snow during, fantasy playoff time. He's going to go see the Bears twice a week. He's going to Green Bay Packers twice in the season. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I just feel Chris Godwin is, the guy in this debate because not just is he going to see the increase in target shares, he is that beast that you think Kenny Golladay is. You look at him last night in the preseason game. He's out there catching a bubble screen, breaking a leg tackle, and getting into the end zone. I know it's preseason, but the guy's showing it on the field.
And I was thrilled. The play by Godwin himself was great, but just how efficient that offense moved down the field. Like Jameis looks comfortable, and that's like the other debate is like Stafford. Usually I want to put my eggs in his basket. He's a better quarterback, more established. Mm-hmm. But if Arians is this true QB whisperer and unlocks that ceiling, and the relationship's apparently unbelievable right now between those two, and it certainly looked that way, even if it's only a drive, just the pace and the high volume, and they just march down the field.
Stafford has to be a game manager. They want to win the games. Jameis Winston wants to win a contract. They're going to go for some big numbers this year. And there's going to be a lot. They're going to want to take more risk. You can't take away, what happened to Matt Stafford during the offseason as well. Glad everything worked out for his wife and everything. But that could be on his mind as well. How do you know that doesn't linger into the season? How do you know that complications don't come up, God forbid. But, those are some things that maybe he's just totally hasn't been able to dedicate himself in the offseason like Jameis Winston has. And I just feel like, any type of, lingering effects from that could possibly go his way. And I want to go with the guy with the, the more high risk, high ceiling, and I feel is Winston.
Yeah, so we're wrapping up here with the time, and I'll have one of my final thoughts, and then we'll get to anyone else's. So I have found that in fantasy, especially in redraft, tying your assets, especially receivers who are just more volatile by nature because they rely on another position. Mm-hmm. It's harder to just project receivers because if they don't throw them the ball, then they don't produce. Doesn't matter what the matchup is. If Winston isn't throwing it to Godwin in that particular game, it doesn't matter. If he's not throwing it to Mike Williams, it doesn't matter. Tying receivers, even if they're number twos, to great offenses is more my style. And I fell into this trap last year. I was grabbing guys like, Kelvin Benjamin. He's the number one on Buffalo. He's going to get all the targets.
Right.
Bomb.
Yeah.
Oh, Kenny Stills, number one in Miami. Bomb. I would rather have... I personally would rather have the wide receiver 2 in a prolific offense. I know the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to have a top 5 passing offense. The Chargers, I would say, yes, we would also fall in that category, but I like Godwin over Mike Williams because I don't think that he'll have any type of touchdown regression. And I'm not confident that the Lions will put on a top 10 passing offense, which is why, at the end of the day, I think that even though Golladay is the number one, I don't think that his targets will be... I think the only way he can really emerge is he has to be extremely efficient with his targets. And one thing with Golladay, I remember from last year, a lot of his touchdowns got called back. Mm-hmm. He would 1 foot out of bounds or holding penalty, a lot of weird stuff. You're like, oh, this guy's a freak. The only way I see Golladay is if his touchdowns just skyrocket and his efficiency is through the roof. But I'm going to go with the guy that's on the better passing offense and just better offense in general with Chris Godwin. So any other final thoughts, guys?
Final thoughts for me. I'm not going to argue. The Tampa Bay Bucks are going to be an amazing offense for fantasy. Take away running backs because they don't have any. But and that helps your case even more for the wide receivers, right? Mm-hmm. But regardless, we're still talking about wide receiver 2s competing with wide receiver 1s, even if it is in a more prolific, a more volume-based offense that's going to get a ton of passes. You're still competing with a number 1 who should out-target you. That's where my only contention, where we're pinning these guys up against Kenny Golladay, who even if Stafford throws 100 less attempts, Galladay's still going to see a major chunk of the smaller pie, if you will, which puts him slightly above these guys. I'm not saying they're not talented. I love them all. Okay, let's have a love fest. Love all these guys, but Kenny Galladay's the number 1.
Kenny Golladay had 119 targets last year. Chris Godwin had 95. If you don't think Chris Godwin can get 20 targets this year, more than what he got
Golden
last
Tate
year,
is gone.
but 20 more targets, that's all. It's 20 target difference, and yeah, you're saying wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Robert Woods, Rams, they do pretty good last year. I mean, Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, that's fair.
Who's the wide receiver 1 over there? Who's the wide receiver 2 over there?
Matter.
It doesn't matter. They're putting up awesome numbers. So you can't really compare just because he's the wide receiver 1 on the team or he's the wide receiver 2 on the team. If that offense is throwing 5,000 yards a season and this offense is throwing 2,000 yards a season, then, I think that plays into factor.
My wrap-up thought on my guy, Mike Williams.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
He's still exists.
Yeah, he's still here. My final thought on him is, every time I look at what he did with his first full season last year, really, I count it as his rookie year, but people can say what they want. His stats and the stuff he did was eerily similar to a guy that was really efficient his rookie year, Rob Gronkowski, with a ton of touchdowns. Talent's talent. I don't know. And the fact that they drafted him so high and they saw the talent bust out, I'm a believer that they're going to go in the season, hey, we got to give Mike Williams the ball as much as we can possibly do it.
Yeah, and I mean, Keenan Allen's health too. Like, obviously the last 2 years he's been healthy and those injuries were fluky, but I don't know, he still takes some huge hits, the role he's in. Like, imagine if he gets hurt and then Mike Williams could be that number 1 in Phillip Rivers. There's tons of upside there too. I do lean. These guys are neck and neck in my rankings, but I'm leaning Godwin after. I know it's just preseason, but seeing that offense just click the way it did, even if he's the number 2, there were a couple times last year Golladay, when he ascended to the number 1 role, he had those monster games, those 15 target games. But there were a few, when he faced off with the Vikings or strong defenses with number 1 corners, he had a couple 2.5 games and just disappeared too. So I'm a little bit weary of that, especially when they get a little more run heavy. I just see Godwin being a steadier guy in that slot, even in a number 2 role. I think he's getting 5 catches a week, plus the red zone upside with the big body and the big catch radius that Golladay does so great with too. To me, I think that even in the number 2 role, that might pan out with better stats.
Yeah, and just one last thing. So, if you look at the way that their offenses are set up, Golladay right now is kind of at his ceiling. He's the number 1 receiver on the team. There's really nothing more that can help boost his stock. But imagine a scenario where Hunter Henry goes down, Mike Williams, boom. What about Mike Evans? What if he gets hurt? Oh, okay, Chris Godwin's the number 1 now. Goes up. Kenny Golladay. Oh, Marvin Jones gets hurt. It's the same. Nothing can really make Golladay better at this point because this is kind of what his reality is. Whereas Godwin and Mike Williams, there's a chance they could even go up even higher with injuries or whatnot. But we've reached the end, so we're going to go to a vote. So it's easy for me. I'm sticking with my boy Chris Godwin. I traded for him in a Dynasty League yesterday. I traded Kenny Golladay to get him.
That's an emotional thought. That's an emotional thought.
I can't do Golladay. I have to move him.
Yep.
And so I traded because I was I need Chris Godwin.
Smart move.
So I got Chris Godwin in a Dynasty League. So that's my vote.
I'm leaning Godwin too. It's real close, but I'm going to go to Godwin. Yeah.
Nice. All right. You guys made a great case for Godwin. I was kind of leaning towards that way, but I really, these guys are all neck and neck for me, and I'm going to stick with Mike Williams. I think just luck of the draw. Something's going to break his way this year, and he's gonna have an awesome season.
Splitting hairs again, right? I mean, this talent that we're talking about. These are great guys that we're talking about because they're all very close. Kenny Golladay, man, I can't back off a wide receiver 1 in a Matthew Stafford offense. We're not talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay? We're not talking about an awful
Super Bowl
offense.
champion-led Jacksonville Jaguars from Nick Foles, you mean?
Oh, Nick Foles, yeah. We're not talking about a crappy team here. We're talking about the Lions. They're decent. They're good. Matthew Stafford, I believe in him. Kenny Golladay, for sure.
Chris Godwin.
All right, there we go. We're buying into the hype, the Chris Godwin train.
Get out of here.
All right, cool. So we will be back. So that's going to wrap up the second episode here of the Fantasy Roundtable. We will be back with the next episode where we're going to be talking about the tight end position and kind of looking outside the top guys. So thanks for watching.